Board of Directors. We are so glad that all of you are here to be part of our very first live stream. We're very excited to be sharing the world premiere of Arise, which Cerddorion originally commissioned for performance in 2020 to celebrate the 100th anniversary of the 19th Amendment. Today, singing about the historic struggle for voting rights could not feel more timely or more important. And we're so pleased that with Arise, Sidney Boquiren has created a beautiful expression of the power of music to provoke and inspire as well as entertain. All of us in Cerddorion hope that you'll be as moved by the piece as we have been. Now I would like to introduce Cerddorion's wonderful artistic director, James John, who's going to tell you a little bit about how the next 45 minutes will unfold. Jim?
Thank you so much, Ellen, for that wonderful introduction, and welcome everybody. It is so delightful to be back singing for you live. So through the miracle of modern technology tonight, we will be coming to you live. I'll be conducting in real time. We're not using click tracks. We're not using any pre-recorded material. We are coming to you scattered from throughout the United States. Our choir is here, mostly in the tri-state area. And we have our flutist, Adrian Inglis, is based in Texas, and she happens to be in Colorado at the moment. And our harpist, Tasha Smith-Godinez, is coming to us from San Diego. So one of the things I've tried to do throughout the course of the pandemic is look for silver linings, and this is the one of them, that we can gather from afar in ways that we never could before. We have spent the last 6 to 9 months learning this new technology using Jamulus, software called Jamulus, and it has been a journey. We'll talk more about that a little bit later, but I think we all felt in October or November, whenever we first tried this, we kind of landed on another planet, and we had to deal with singing where the laws of physics no longer applied or something. It was like relearning to do something we loved. And finally, we've gotten to this evening, which is a wonderful culmination, presenting our work to you. And not only is it a wonderful culmination for us in terms of putting all what we've learned about performance in this medium, but also it's been, I don't think without the wonderful work of Sidney Boquiren, that we could have sustained our inspiration throughout this time, because he gave us a wonderful, wonderful piece to present to you. And let's see, what else did I want to say here? So I'm going to turn it over to Sidney in a second to tell you a little bit about the piece before we sing it for you. But before I do that, I just wanted to mention, if you'd like to donate at any time to Cerddorion during the performance, there is a link to our PayPal donation page in the description, and there's a program, if you haven't found it, in the description. Also, if you look under Show More in the description, you can find all the texts and the movement order for Sidney's piece. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Sidney Marquez Boquiren to tell you a little bit about his piece. Sidney.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining us tonight for this premiere performance of Arise. A very special thanks to Jim and the choir. It has just been such a pleasure and an honor to work on this piece with you all. I'm just going to very briefly give an overview of the piece, and with the assistance of the performers, we'll also demonstrate some moments from it. So as we know, the Arise draws text from 5 suffragists through multiple generations, but I decided to begin first with an introduction, and this introduction uses an iconic harp gesture, which is the glissando. In this case, it's always rising, so you always get the sense of being lifted up, of going up, of arising, if you will. So our harpist Tasha Smith-Godinez will demonstrate a bit of this now. so much, Tasha. You heard all that rising gesture, right? I just also love that glissando in harp is just such a wonderful sound. And then part one, the main part of the piece begins with the choir and an ah vowel. I imagine this as if they're about to sing arise, the title of the work, but in fact it's the phoneme that prepares the soloist's entrance on the text I. And this is where we first hear the title of the piece, I entreat my sisters to arise. So arise, I entreat my sisters to arise. So that was part one. For the first interlude, and I'm using the choir here, I imagine this as a protest march starting from a distance with people joining in and coming together, and you're on the street and they're passing by you, and it gets louder and louder, and there's a layering process that you'll hear as people join in the protest song. Jim and the choir will demonstrate a bit of this now.
Great. Thank you, Sidney. And I think another interesting point here is one of the things we're dealing with in terms of performance is what I'm sure most of you have heard the term latency. So that is the sound delay, the sound lag that we experience over the internet. And so one of the ways that it works to our advantage here is that in this particular movement, we're not required to line up necessarily with one another all the time. And it also is a mirror of sort of the struggle to come together and then at the end join forces in a powerful way. So altos, let's just begin this, please. And notice this is the one movement I'm not conducting in a traditional way.
The right is ours, 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 the right is ours. The right is ours, the right is ours, the right is ours, the right is ours, the right is ours.
Great. Okay, and that gives you the sense of how each section kind of layers in and then it builds from there.
Thank you so much, choir and Jim.
Thank you, Sidney.
So then the work continues with Interlude II. And here I used flute technique of multiphonics, but I also chose the bass flute. So this is the first time we're hearing the flute, and so I wanted to start with the lower instrument, and then later on you'll hear the regular C flute, reference of course to the rising register. And for this, I used a technique of multiphonics, which creates these really complex and really interesting colors. And flutists out there, I'm not a flutist myself, but I hear that these tend to need a lot of energy and effort to maintain. And I added the extra layer of these, most of these being flute multiphonic trills. And our flutist Adrian Inglis will demonstrate a couple of these now.
Thank you, Sidney. I love multiphonics. It's a great technique. It sounds really cool, and it can be done on any flute or a lot of different instruments. The fingerings are sometimes just normal fingerings, just played a little bit differently with different level of air pressure. Other times it's a special fingering. I'll play what on flute is a high D, but I'll make it a multiphonic by doing a little bit slower air. It's a really cool color, but you hear more than one note, two notes. If I play a high B fingering, I can get an underblow. You can get other colors. And then Sidney has also asked for multiphonic trills. So we'll go from one multiphonic to another in a slow or a fast trill. And this is a little bit of what that sounds like. So it's very cool. I think you'll enjoy the piece, and I'm so glad he put it in this piece. And back to you, Sidney.
Thank you so much, Adrian. And I just love those complex sounds. I mean, and just really works well, I feel, metaphorically in this piece. And then this Interlude II is followed by words from Sojourner Truth regarding women's rights. And I set this as a solo for a voice and then with harp supporting it. And then there's the final interlude, Interlude III, on the text of Bread and Roses. And this phrase, it's actually a reference to words used by an earlier suffragist, Helen Todd, which was then set into a poem by Oppenheim and set into songs much later. And many of us are probably familiar with the song Bread and Roses, much used in labor advocacy and labor movements. But here I turned to Rose Schneiderman's the word she used, which uses the phrase or references Bread and Roses, the fact that in terms of women here in the context needing of bread, both bread and roses, and you will hear the reference to that in this solo movement. And the entire piece of Arise ends in part 3 with the very, very uplifting words of Mary Church Terrell, which I feel is a very hopeful, gives us a very hopeful sense of the future. And so I wanted to end the piece with these words: our desires will burst forth into glorious fruition ere long. And I think this is something that is applicable then, applicable now, and certainly we can relate to that in a variety of situations, if you will, even to what the context of what we're in now. Thank you again so much, folks, for joining us tonight. Please do enjoy this premiere performance of Arise by Cerddorion Vocal Ensemble, supported by Adrian Inglis on flute, Tasha Smith-Codinas on harp, and directed by James John. Thank you.
wanted to tell you a mite about women's rights. And so I came out and said so. I am sitting among you to watch, and every once and a while I will come out and tell you what time of night it is.
Oh, thank you. So take a bow, our wonderful soloists, Adrian Inglis on flute and bass flute, wave, take a bow. Tasha Smith-Godinez on harp, thank you, Tasha. And Anna Harmon, our soprano soloist, wave, Anna. And Jamie Carrillo, our alto soloist, thank you so much. And Cerddorion, take a bow. And thank you. And Sidney, of course, thank you so much. And now I'd like to invite Ellen Shore, our president, to moderate a short Q&A, after which we have another musical tidbit for you. So stick around to hear some music at the very end, too. Ellen, take it away.
Okay. I'm verklempt that no matter how many times we've sung those words, they still get me every time. Onward and upward. So much progress and so much more work yet to do. This is the fun part where we get to take advantage of the interactive potential of live streaming. So we're going to get a conversation going, first with Jim and Sidney, and we also have some of the performers here that I want to introduce. Our wonderful harpist, Tasha Smith-Godinez, flutist, Adrian Inglis, and three of our singers, Anna Harmon, soprano, and Jamie Carrillo, alto, whom you heard as soloists, and Cady Wilkes, alto, is joining us. We would love to see your questions or comments in the chat. Anything you'd like to ask or observations you'd like to make, whether it's about the composition itself, the process we went through preparing it, the software, what it was like for the singers to rehearse this way, or anything else you'd like to talk about. So Sidney and Jim, would you start by telling us how Arise came into being?
Sure. Well, so we had the idea of commissioning a piece in 2018, and we went to Sidney, and Sidney proposed this idea about a piece to commemorate the 100th anniversary of the 19th Amendment, and I mean that's the short story. So we actually did. I think the important point there is it didn't actually begin as Cerddorion didn't come along with the idea, well, let's commission a piece for the 100th anniversary of the 19th Amendment. I knew Sidney, I'd worked with him before, and I knew so we approached him for a commission, and he pitched this idea. So, Sidney?
Thanks, Jim. So when Cerddorion approached me for a commission, I thought about projects that I've done in the past, and I put together an earlier project proposal, which didn't come to fruition, but then I felt really strongly about it, about the worth of this work. And this is on the commemoration of the ratification of the 19th Amendment. I do tend to use my platform as a composer to raise social justice issues and to partake in that conversation, in that dialogue through the music that I write. And so it seemed for me really important to take part in elevating and uplifting the voices of women, particularly historical suffragists. And so I chose these texts, which I felt worked well together, and this notion of arising, of rising up, as a very hopeful text, as I mentioned earlier. And then from there, Jim and I spoke about the logistics of it, and as you heard Ellen mention earlier, originally this was supposed to have premiered last year, the actual 100th anniversary of the ratification of the passing of the 19th Amendment, but because of the pandemic, it has been reimagined to this online context. And so here we are, more than a year later.
Yes. So maybe I'll turn it back to Ellen in a second, but should we address what might be the elephant in the room a little bit, Ellen? Which is...
Sure. In case you're not aware of the elephant, why a male composer, male artistic director, and a mixed choir?
Yes. So we thought about this from the beginning. We thought, well, should this be an issue? And we all fairly quickly came to the conclusion, no. I think that, some people have brought the issue. I mean, someone brought the issue to your attention, Ellen. I think particularly. Is that accurate? And other people have mentioned it. So I mean, my point of view, we're all in this together, and this is a piece about everyone's voice. And yes, we should advocate for composers. I think it's essential now for musicians to seek out and advocate for composers who've been left out of the quote-unquote canon by virtue of whatever reason, racism, sexism, so on and so forth. And that's absolutely the case. But I think if you open the sticky wicket of should only a woman write a piece about women's rights and only performed by women's composers, I think that's creating its own wall and barrier. So that's how I perceive it. I don't know if you have thoughts, Sidney, as from your perspective, writing the piece, how you dealt with that issue.
Yeah, thank you. I mean, this is a question that I grappled with when I first thought about this. Should I even do this? And so this was not an easy decision on my part when I came up with the project proposal, but I felt strongly enough that I wanted to contribute to the efforts of raising women's voices, of reminding everyone of this landmark occasion. But I tried to do my best to sort of move myself in the background and thus the words of historical suffragists. And of course the women soloists, that's first and foremost. But I'm reminded of the words that I use with Grimké, the part 1. She says, in fact, that I entreat my sisters to arise, etc., side by side on the platform of human rights with man, to whom they were designed to be companions, equals, and helpers in every word and work. And that's why I chose that text to sort of help me address this issue. I think I'll leave that there, Jim.
Thank you, Sidney. That's great.
That's wonderful. I wonder if we could turn to a couple of questions that have come up in the chat. First, for Sidney, there's a question from Nathaniel Polish. Did the composer need to do something special to make the piece better suited to an ensemble working remotely?
Oh, yeah. This is a great question because when we began the project, I didn't know about Jamulus, to be honest. And the choir was just embarking, Cerddorion was just embarking on the Jamulus journey, if you will. And our first rehearsal, the first piece I actually wrote was part 1 on the Sarah Grimké text. And there I imagined these chords, these harmonies that are just can blend from one into the next, above which the soloist floats. And so when we did this, the harmonies allowed for the lag, if you will. So it didn't matter so much if everything wasn't equally aligned, or exactly aligned, rather. And the other movement that I'd written for this, keeping in mind the lag that we encounter online, is the first interlude, the protest march. And I had really imagined this to be sort of even more, less aligned. If you can imagine yourself in a protest march, we always hear people chanting, and you always hear sort of a unified sound, but sort of distinct voices coming through. And so this is what I was imagining for the march, for this interlude. But as the months progress, as the rehearsals progress, the Cerddorion really worked hard on the alignments, and so the misalignments that I had imagined would be difficult, or rather would occur, they occurred less and less. And so the final result, of course, is that there's more exactness, and that works as well, of course. It's a celebration of both the misalignment that could have occurred and also the end result that we all heard tonight, with everything just lining up wonderfully. Thank you for that question.
Well, thank you, Sidney, and thank you, Jim, for having us all so well trained that we can't help but line ourselves up.
Sure. May I just want to, for a technical point, Sidney, would you mind muting your channel when you're not speaking, just because there's a lot of fan coming? I think if you would, and then when you just kind of like a Zoom situation.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you. Okay, go ahead, Ellen.
Okay. And Sidney's fan is related to another question that came up from a dear former member, and I hope future member of Cerddorion, Ken Short, says, Cady, Anna, Jamie, how much of a sense of singing together do you get from singing on this platform? And what do you feel is missing besides snack time together?
We do miss snack time.
Yeah.
I mean, I can remember in the early days when it was just a few of us who were testing out Jamulus, and I think, Jamie, it was you and I, we were getting pretty far along, and we went into our own room, and I think we tried harmonizing just like a camp song together, and that was the first time that we were like, we did it. Oh, actually, no, before that it was just row, row, row your boat with Jim in the room, and we're like, we did row, row, row your boat. And there was actually this really nice sense of, we are singing together, and it was kind of funny how much joy we got out of that moment. But there is a sense of singing together and me listening and harmonizing. It's different, but yeah.
It is different, but I think so many of us were really struck by just how emotional it was the first time we got to harmonize in real time. I do want to get back to the fan question because it reminded me of some of the trials and tribulations we've come across. Jamie, was it you who had to put your laptop in the freezer?
No, it was not me.
We had issues with loud fans, and some of the more tech-savvy among us suggested stick your laptop in the freezer before we start rehearsing so that the battery takes longer to heat up. And Cady, while we've got you, I don't know if your roommates are ready for their close-up, but we had some...
Give me a second. I also am aware that I think my camera is a little laggy, so you might see these in 20 seconds. Give me 1 minute, 1 second.
Cady has some very special roommates who inadvertently made a sonic contribution to our rehearsing. And while she's bringing them to the screen, let me see.
Here we go.
Oh, okay.
Not sure if this is on screen, but in 20 seconds or so, you should see me holding my rabbit, who we realized was snoring so loudly that he was interrupting rehearsal. So those are just one of the other things that we're like, well, that's a new part of rehearsal.
That's a new part of rehearsal.
Well, there was also a wonderful change from being on Zoom where, only one person can talk at a time. Yeah. And suddenly you're going to somewhere where you can interrupt each other but talk over each other, not just the computer interrupts you and you're silenced. Everybody can actually talk at the same time. It was kind of amazing.
Absolutely. And we have a question from our old friend and former board member and collaborator Christopher Keynes wants to know, will we be bringing this performance live and in person? And the answer is absolutely. We would like to perform this again for as many people face to face as we possibly can. And I'm looking at the time and thinking we should probably move on. Sidney and Jim, is there anything you wanted to close out with?
I don't have anything that's burning. Sidney, do you have any further thoughts? My only thought is thank you, Sidney, for writing this wonderful piece and really inspiring us through all of this. Sincerely, it's been a joy.
Well, from my end, just a thank you to everyone again It's been a journey, as I've said, and we've faced challenges that thankfully we were able to surmount working together like this. And I just look forward to the live experience of this, which will be just so wonderful and rewarding. Thank you again, everyone.
Great, thank you, Sidney.
Thank you.
So as we, and thank you, Ellen, for that discussion. And as we close out the evening, we're going to finish by performing for you again the final movement to leave you with some music. Onward and upward we go. And before we do that, I just want a few kind of quick announcements. Again, we will be back live in 2021, 2022. And one of the things we'll be doing is this piece. If you're interested in singing with us, you can check out our website for information about auditions, which we will hope to hold in person in August. We rehearse on the Upper West Side on Tuesday nights. Let's see, what are my notes here? Yes, if you enjoyed the concert, we would and feel as though you'd like to support Cerddorion. Again, we have a donate button in the description on YouTube. You can also find it on our website. We have a Venmo handle that maybe Emily can pop in the chat. And follow us on social media. And a few thank yous. So I want a big shout out to someone who I'm going to call our Jamulus Whisperer, and that is Adrian Cho, who's running behind the scenes the tech aspects of this performance. So Adrian, has been wonderful. Thank you, and thank you for all you do at SyncSpace. And a quick shout out to Karen Siegel and Brian Mountford for also, I think Brian is one of those other rare breed of Jamulus Whisperer. So they exist. You may find them, but there'll be a movie someday about the Jamulus Whisperers. I know it. So on that note, thank you all for coming, and please enjoy one more performance of the final movement from Arise.
Stars.